All right, welcome back to our video series. We're looking at chapter 6 now. We're focusing on the Americas, right? So, the civilizations that existed in the Americas during the classical era of 600 BCE to 600 CE. And in part one, we're going to be looking at the one of many different civilizations and states that arose in the Andean region of South America, primarily modern day Peru. And this one is known as the Moche or the Mochica is the other name for them. And this picture kind of tells us that one of their most interesting characteristics is the pottery, right? Their level of ceramic work. And here we see like some type of guy. He must have been an upper class guy to be able to afford uh, that a pot of his face is made. Right, so we have remnants of these pots all over Peru, all over where the Moche used to live. So let's talk about their architecture. And here we see the remnants, the ruins of one of their temples. So the Moche are again their classical Andean civilization living in modern day Peru. There were different civilizations and states during this time, and the Moche is just one of many and is the one that we're gonna focus on. So they built these huge monumental temples, right? And they're temples to the sun, temples to the moon, and these temples, these different deities, these different gods, right? Shows us, of course, that they're polytheistic, but also shows us that they uh, that the amount of labor necessary to build these temples, to carve them out of stone, is absolutely immense, right? So here we see another one. Um, and that means that there had to be a strong state, a strong government to be able to organize all this labor and pay all these workers through taxes. Um, and basically, these temples became the urban centers. And then they would build houses and fortifications around these religious temples. So all the people live out in the countryside, and then during festivals or religious holidays, they'll come in to the urban center to do the prayers and do the rituals and do everything else. And if you kind of notice the background of this picture, right, you can see that this is not a very hospitable area. It's very dry. So that also tells us that the Moche had to build extensive irrigation systems, right, canals and wells, in order to capture and hold as much rainforest as possible, rainfall as possible, to divert whatever rivers they might have had, or to gain access to underground water supplies. And the one of the biggest issues of the Moche and is that the level of rainfall changed. It fluctuated. So one year or 5 years they will have good rainfall, and irrigation wasn't as big of an issue. And then other years to have 5 years of drought, and where there's not enough water, and then they'll have 5 more years of of too much rain, so then there'll be like flooding. So their environment, because they live on this coast in Peru and South America, their environment is constantly changing. The rainfall there is constantly changing, and they had to adapt every season or every few years to these changes in their environment. Uh, Here we see a woven cloth of the moche, right, made out of probably llama hair or llama wool. So this primarily, like most societies, of course, the Moche were agricultural. So their main job was farmers. There's some people who are pastoralists, right? People living up in the mountains with the llamas. They might have been pastoralists. So they would have been cultivating potatoes. They would have been cultivating corn and beans. Corn, of course, coming slowly making its way from Mesoamerica. Like I said, they had llamas. They had ceramics, like you see, the picture again. Lots of jewelry, lots of fancy woven cloth or textiles, and they traded. Right, so this is kind of like a step up from the Chavan, right, who are like that ancestral civilization of the Andes. With the Chavan, they barely traded. But the Moche, they kind of had more of a trade network set up across the Andes Mountains, but they wouldn't go further than that. They didn't have long distance trade, like say from the South America to Mesoamerica, where the Mayas would be. And it, again, we have the same kind of environmental reasons, right? They don't have large boats. They don't have large rivers where the boats can float. Um, and they don't have large animals or wheeled vehicles to transport excess amount of goods, large quantities of goods. So because of the environmental situation, plus, of course, they're on top of mountains, it makes it very difficult to go for long distance trade. So again, they had trade networks within their region of the Andes in South America, but beyond that, other parts of South America really weren't connected through trade that much. So one unique thing about the Moche is the way that they're organized. They're organized into these what we call ailus, and basically, the idea is that each town is composed of people who are supposedly blood relatives, and so it's supposed to be like a kinship group, right, where everyone is somewhat related to each other, and they work together, they live together, they shared everything together. So there wasn't like an idea of private property; it was what we call communal property, right? That the land belongs to the group. But even then, like the group, the Aileo society, those villages had to pay tribute or pay taxes to the local ruler, to the local king, and so there wasn't a strong need for like a government authority, because the idea was that since everyone is related or knows each other and they live in these small communities, they'll kind of like self patrol one another, self control each other, and keep there's no need to have like a large bureaucracy or law enforcement or tax officials, stuff like that. Um, when it comes to religious practices, we see the continued use of ancestor veneration. Right, this was carried on from the Chavin in the previous time period, and we also see the beginning use of human sacrifice. It was not very common for the Moche to use human sacrifice, mostly with animal sacrifice, but I guess on special occasions or during extreme necessity or extreme times, they might change, or they might use human sacrifice. All right, so let's get a look at what happened to these people. Well, their climate changed, as I mentioned, right? So you had a generation of heavy rains followed by a generation of droughts, um, and imagine what's happening to these people living during this time. Imagine you are living under this king, under a priest, right? These priests that claim that they can speak to the gods and figure out the will of the gods, right? These kings who say the gods have chosen them to rule, right? And these kings and these priests, or these priest kings, and probably, they have zero control. Of course, they have no control over nature. So when you claim to be divine or to be connected to the divine, to the gods, right? And your town is getting flooded or your people are starving because there's no food, because there's no water, then what authority do you have, right? You can only claim authority if things are good, but if things are going bad, right, then people are going to lose faith in you and they're going to say, well, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about. He's not doing anything good. So we see this environmental climate changes, disrupting the, year in and year out agricultural production, and then this leads to the decline in the authority of the religious and political leaders. So we have, new leaders rising up to challenge the old ones. So we're gonna have civil war, right? So it's kind of this combination of climate change and decline in justification of authority plus civil war. You combine those three elements, and then you see the collapse of the Moche civilization in South America. And that's it for this first video. Thanks for watching.